There is a sacredness to food. Even people who aren't religious like to have a little blessing before meals or a time to reflect.
I'm Dalia Colon, and this is The Zest. Citrus, seafood, Spanish flavor, and Southern charm. The Zest celebrates cuisine and community in the Sunshine State. Today, the sacred side of food. Andrew Hudson is on a mission. He's an organic gardener and program director for the nonprofit organization Community Harvest SRQ. And Andrew wants to connect the people of Sarasota with its local food. I met Andrew through a mutual friend, Chef Steve Phelps of Indigenous restaurant. Maybe you've heard of it. If not, do yourself a huge favor and look it up. Steve describes Andrew as, quote, rebooting the community food system in Sarasota. Ooh, those are some big words. So, of course, I wanted us all to meet this guy. So, as Andrew explains in this conversation, he connects restaurants and neighbors to get surplus produce off the field and onto people's plates. We also dig into Sarasota's Eat Local Week, food sovereignty, and what it means to give communities more control over what they eat. As I learned in this conversation, Andrew is full of surprises, one of which is he's a Mennonite minister, so he brings a really thoughtful perspective to the sacredness of food and the idea of giving farmland time to rest. What a concept. Andrew reminds us all that caring for the soil and each other go hand in hand. So here's my conversation with Andrew Hudson.
I'm Andrew Hudson. I'm the program director for Community Harvest SRQ. I'm also a Mennonite minister, and I work with churches in that capacity on finding the sacredness in the land where their buildings are. So that's called Sabbath gardening, and that's my other thing. And I promote local food in the Sarasota area.
Okay, I didn't know about the Mennonite pastor thing, so let's just bookmark that for now. Tell me a little bit about Community Harvest. What exactly do you all do?
We work with, as I call it, the local food shed, which is the layer of farms and restaurants locally who are involved in food that is both grown and eaten here. So we promote local foods, local restaurants like Indigenous, and I also work directly with local farmers a lot. I was an organic farmer in this area for 15 years. So I've got a lot of connections to farmers around here, and we try to get them out in front of people through Facebook Live events. But the main things we're known for are two things. We're known for gleaning. So we go to farms where there's leftover food and get that onto people's plates. And then we have Eat Local Week, which is a week or so in November where we promote the local food shed.
I love the gleaning idea. How does that work? How do you find the leftover food and how do you match it with the people who need it?
It's really important to make it a win for the farmers. So part of it is just cultivating the relationships with the farmers so they know that people are going to come and they're going to follow the rules and they're going to respect the land and all of that. Once you get there, it's pretty easy. We have a partnership with the local food banks, and so they send out pallets full of boxes, and so we just have to take the boxes and put sweet potatoes or greens or whatever into the boxes, and then that goes to the food bank for the larger gleans. Anything less than, say, 4 banana boxes, we just take it directly to a local distributor. So it's kind of a food banking thing, but one thing that I like that we do, that we've done for all of our 15 years, is we make it ambiguous who's there to get food and who's there to get food for the food bank. So everybody who gleans gets a box themselves. And so we're able to have people who need food just come out to farms and get it for themselves.
Oh, that's so cool. And then tell me about the Eat Local Week. That seems like it would get a lot of support in Sarasota.
It is. It's a very Sarasota thing. We had 13 events in 9 days. So it's a busy thing. And we have everything from a fermentation class to a couple restaurant events to events on farms. So it's it's a time for people to get an intensive connection to the local food shed. And especially we try to get people to cross lines. If they're a restaurant people, we'd like to get them at a fermentation event or a plant walk or something, to see themselves connected across outside of the silos that we often operate.
That's very cool. And I know you told me before we started recording, you're not a specialist in food sovereignty, but I've been doing some work around food sovereignty. And we also had Will Schonbacher, who's a professor at USF and leads a food sovereignty initiative there. How do you see these things being connected, sort of eliminating or reducing food waste, connecting people with their food, and just the idea that people should have more control over how their food is grown and how it's prepared and all of that?
Well, one partnership we're really excited about is with Cocoa Roots in the Black community here in Sarasota, which is called Newtown. And Cocoa Roots is working on gleaning and other things, but they just brought in Robin Greenfield, who is a foraging expert.
We've had him on the podcast. Yeah, we love Rob.
Great. Okay, well, we had him here, and so we partnered with Cocoa Roots to produce that event. We had over 100 people there on Friday, and the main theme, Robin talks in a lot of directions, but I'd say the main theme of our partnership with Cocoa Roots is how do we do things that are going to help us survive if we need those kind of skills, but how do we do it in a thriving way? How do we produce more food and access food that will help us, not just in the way the world is now, but fossil fuels are running out and, we need to prepare for things. But how do we thrive while we're doing it? So I think food sovereignty is great news to everybody because they have more control over their future. Looking at foraging as a way to get superfoods like amaranth, which grows wild. So another partnership with Cocoa Roots is we're going to have a chef, Rebecca Peranio. Rebecca is going to give a class on how do you cook amaranth. So you could forage this food, but then let's make something really delicious with it. And that's a sovereignty and a survival thing that is something we can all be excited about.
Yeah. So another thing that Chef Steve said, he's the one who connected us, Chef Steve Phelps of Indigenous restaurant in Sarasota. He described you as rebooting the community food system in Sarasota. That sounds like a monumental task. So for somebody who just wanted to get involved, what's a step they could take to changing the entire system that feels doable?
I would say communitizing, becoming part of networks of people who are working on this. I think Steve is giving more credit than I deserve. There are a lot of people like Steve and I who are working on the local food shed here. And I'm privileged after 15 years as a farmer in this area to be connected with a lot of those people. So the main thing that I think I'm contributing is just naming the potential there. We have a really wonderful organization that Chef Steve is part of called the Sarasota Manatee Originals in this area. And that's 70 independently owned restaurants who promote local food here. So that's a pretty potent, and that's some of our most shishi restaurants. Sarasota is a pretty glitzy place. And this is a lot of our leading restaurants are part of the Sarasota Manatee Originals. And Steve's got leadership within that. So he got me in front of their annual meeting a couple of months ago, and I was able to talk about the food shed, and they responded really well. So at this point, my main answer would be to just back to how to get involved. Come glean. Just help food get to where it should be. We don't want food waste. We want food to be on people's plates. And then Eat Local Week on the calendar, because when people have larger connections, there are all sorts of possibilities. And in our movement, we call it unleashing collective genius.
Oh, I like that.
One of the main things we try to do is create social situations where collective genius can emerge. So we don't just have events. We have events where people can have unplanned social interactions. So that's one of the reasons we do gleaning. It's not just we're accomplishing something, we're also building a social network. We have a series last Thursdays of the month of what we call community conversations. So we're going to be talking about the book Drawdown this coming month, which is about addressing climate change. But we're going to have a potluck first. So yeah, for a lot of our events, we have potlucks first because everybody loves potlucks. And it's a way to not only celebrate food and learn stuff, but to get to know your local food shed through other people.
That's so cool. And when is Eat Local Week?
That'll be November 1st through 15th. So it's a ways out. And I was talking with Chef Steve yesterday, trying to get him on board because we're hoping to have, so Eat Local Week, the theme will be the farmer and the fisher. Because when people think about food sheds, they often only think about the land. And for a waterfront place like this, we need to include the bay and the Gulf. So yeah, we'll have a lot about fisheries. And of course, Chef Steve is really big on that.
That's a great point. And, November, it'll be here before we know it. And that's such a busy time of year. And we have the snowbirds down. So just put it on your calendar now. You said November 1st to 15th?
Yes.
Okay. I'm glad you brought up the word glitzy, because I think that's what a lot of people think of when they think of Sarasota. It's, the mansions and the fancy cars and the shopping. You guys have like my favorite shopping plaza of all time right off 75 with all my favorite stores. But we're hearing from you about the need in Sarasota. So can you talk about that disconnect? And for people like me who are in Tampa, the Tampa area, is it hard to explain that there is need when Sarasota has this reputation for being, as you said, so glitzy?
I see a lot of wealthy places having a lot of people who are part of a sort of servant class, for lack of a better term. They're people to do the jobs for the wealthy. There's something very rich about that kind of community that I love being around. So one of the main things I always like to say is this is not a grim topic. There are communities who have an awful lot to offer who fit that kind of demographic. So we have a fantastic community garden here. It's in the Black community. It's the best community garden here in Sarasota. Anybody who's realistic knows that you're going to have a lot of people to fill the jobs for a place like Sarasota. And so we've got a really good community of folks who fit that.
That's a great point. Okay, I had no idea that you are also a Mennonite minister. Say more about that and the gardens. I want to know all the things.
Cool. I got into the Mennonite church through farming. There are a lot of Mennonite farmers. Some of the best ones around here, including our raw dairy, are Mennonites. And by reading Wendell Berry, who admires Mennonites. So I ended up going to seminary because I was so interested in what the Bible has to say about how you grow food. The Bible has a lot of recommendations around letting land be fallow and that the land has its own wisdom built into it. And if you just let the land regenerate, it'll solve a lot of your problems. So it's called letting the land be fallow. And I had this theory, what if we took that really seriously and on small plots started practicing those kinds of cultural practices, they call them. And so in seminary, I cooked up what I call Sabbath gardening, which is based on in Leviticus and Exodus and Deuteronomy, it says every 7 years you're supposed to let the land rest. And I found even at the seminary, it was hard to get people to let the land rest. They don't want to stop if they're gardening and it's going well. So I came up with a Sabbath model, divide a garden into 7 parts and let 1/7 rest every year. And that's what I'm promoting with churches. Create a garden, use regenerative practices, enjoy growing food, and then you see the 7th, the resting part, move across over 7 years. And it's really easy and it works. It's really amazing what happens when you just let the land rest and you treat it well.
Wow. Okay, it's so interesting that you're coming at this from like a biblical perspective, because I mentioned earlier Will Schonbacher, who's a professor at USF and does a lot with the Food Sovereignty Initiative there, but he's a professor of religious studies, and his interest is also in food. So why do you think these two keep intersecting?
Yeah, well, there is a sacredness to food. Even people who aren't religious like to have a little blessing before meals or a time to reflect. That is so interesting. I want to meet this guy.
Yeah, you two would hit it off. I'll introduce you. But the idea of like the food sovereignty and food justice enmeshed with religion, regardless of what that religion is or if anybody even has a religion. What do you think's going on there?
Well, one thing that I really loved in seminary is there are these different big theological concepts, and I love the concept of incarnation. Classically, it's the idea of God being, embodied in a person. But it's really fascinating to think of food in terms of incarnation, because somehow we have this matter that becomes our bodies, and then all of a sudden it's a person. There's this mystery to we are what we are what we eat. And so I love thinking about the incarnational mystery of food. And I think very few people would articulate it that way, but when I bring it up, people seem to recognize what I'm talking about. I think we all are a bit mystified by, okay, there's this food, okay, here, I have this smoothie that I just drank, and this is going to become me. That's really trippy.
That is trippy. I never thought of it that way. So when we feed people, people always say like food is love, but I guess you really are like giving a piece of yourself to someone by feeding them. So that's
yeah, and
cool.
You're putting the matter together with your own energy, your own creativity, and so when food is formed by somebody, that's a great point. It's the person's love becomes this other person. That's an amazing thing. So I never get over finding that there's just juice in that.
Yeah, so much. And I think most religions would say love your neighbor. So what better way to love your neighbor than feed them? Can I ask an ignorant question? What's the difference between Mennonite and Amish?
Yeah, I get that all the time. Well, first of all, there are many types of Mennonite and there are many types of Amish, and some of them actually overlap. By and large, Amish tend to be plain people. I mean, I'm dressed somewhat plainly, but Amish, have a codified way that they dress, and they tend to be in communities that are overseen by a bishop. Mennonites live more among the general population, and there are tendencies like Amish tend to have limits on how they use technology, which I think there's a great wisdom to, because technology runs away with all of our brains, So I really admire that. We don't have that in my community. I kind of wish we did. I kind of wish I had limits.
I know. Well, I'm glad you have technology today because you're talking to me over Zoom, but I get it. I'm from Ohio and we have some Amish friends, and every time we visit them, we're just like, this is nice. This is really nice. Yeah. Okay. Thank you for explaining that.
We're in Ohio.
Cleveland.
Okay.
Yeah.
So outside of Cleveland, I assume you don't have Amish people in Cleveland?
You know what? You'll see them at the Cavs games once in a while on their Rumspringa, but a little bit east of Cleveland.
There you go.
Listen, I got an Amish cookbook in my kitchen right now that I could break out, but our friends are in Middlefield and Burton, so a little bit east of Cleveland. That's like an Amish enclave, but we're used to seeing them, and they're pretty worldly, I suppose. Like our friends have cell phones. They shop at Walmart and everywhere else that we shop, but we can tell that they're Amish because of the way that they're dressed. Whereas you are dressed, we wouldn't necessarily know that you were of a particular faith by the way that you're dressed. So thank you. I was just curious about that. Are there any good, now I'm so curious, like when I think of Amish food, I think of like pies, like shoe fly pie and like the big pretzels, Are there any like traditional Mennonite foods?
Well, since you brought up cookbooks, one of my profs was really into a couple Mennonite cookbooks as theological works, works of incarnation. So the More with Less cookbook is the classic. Doris Jansen Longenacre. She just worked through this really delicious, simple food that also drew on simple foods from other parts of the world. So they were helpful in being conscious of other people in other cultures, which Mennonites are very strong on doing outreach and support for people in other parts of the world. So that's the number one thing I'm an eater of food and a grower of food. I'm not actually a preparer or cooker of food. When I think of Mennonite foods, I don't think of so much like shoe fly pie or prepared things. I think of canning, and I think of preserving and growing food, and just the joy of, just last weekend, we had a planting at our church garden. And it's just awesome to go out with people and enjoy being there and do things together. So that's the big thing about Amish and Mennonites, Anabaptists, is we do things together.
I love that. And I've noticed more churches planting gardens, which I think is amazing on so many levels. Do you have any interactions with the Indigenous community? That was the original purpose of this call, but I'm loving it. I'm learning so much.
Well, at the risk of telling you stuff you already know, just the basic Indigenous reality in Florida is the Seminole and Miccosukee weren't originally from this peninsula. I don't have any meaningful contact with them. I do want to give a shout out to something I'm really glad to be part of, which is there are a bunch of clergy throughout the peninsula who are having vigils every Sunday in support of those who are incarcerated in the Everglades. And there are actually two other places that never get any press. So we have a Sunday vigil at 4 p.m. here in Sarasota in support of a Miccosukee-led thing for the freedom of the folks in the Everglades, because that's also a violation of Miccosukee land, that prison. So that's, I indirectly am connected with them. I know there are Seminole-led food sovereignty efforts. I'm not in touch with those. When I was in seminary, and it has to be said, the Calusa and the Tokabega and all the other original peoples of this area, where I was Tokabega land, they died off very quickly after contact with Europeans. So they're not around, unfortunately, but gone but not forgotten. But when I was I think you're going to like this. When I was in seminary, I was in the Great Lakes region. And so I was part of a couple studies of Robin Wall Kimmerer's braiding sweetgrass.
Love it.
And I was actually in Potawatomi territory, which is her nation. And so I got to go to events led by the Potawatomi when I was up there. So there's this wonderful thing, up there, they tap what they call sugar bushes, sugar maples. Traditionally, the Potawatomi have done that, and the Algonquin and a lot of northern tribes. They didn't boil the sap like Europeans. They actually figured out that you could make these very shallow dishes and leave it out in the frozen air, and the ice would separate and form pure water, and they would reduce it by taking the ice off every night. And so I got to be part of a bowl making thing, and I have one of these reducing bowls from the Potawatomi. So that's one of my prized possessions. But yeah, that's the kind of thinking, and I just love to tell that story because that is superior technology. Right? They're not burning, there's so much more energy efficient to do it that way. Why has that not occurred to anybody in the dominant culture? We could guess at that, but there's so much to learn from Indigenous ways of doing things. There's the rice culture of the Potawatomi that she talks about in the book. I can't recommend braiding sweetgrass enough, and it sounds like you're a fan too.
Yeah, and she has another book I read a few months ago. It's shorter, and the name is escaping me.
Serviceberry.
Yes, thank you. Serviceberry. Loved it. Yeah, it's funny that you brought up the Potawatomi. There's a friend of mine who's an artist, Marcia Morse Mullins in Polk County, and she learned to weave baskets from the Potawatomi, and now she's won all these awards and her work has been shown all over the world. So yeah, they're definitely onto something. This is fascinating. Well, shout out to Chef Steve for connecting us. This was kind of like a blind date. Like, I didn't really know what we were going to talk about. Neither did you. Is there anything else you want to mention?
No, I really appreciate your curiosity. I don't get to talk about Sabbath gardening enough. I haven't figured out how to get paid to do that yet. So thank you so much. And I just want to encourage people, anybody listening, you really can go out and start a garden. In Florida, you need to keep the land covered. So mulch. Mulch is my big one-word recommendation.
Mulch is our friend. Okay. Thank you so much, Andrew. It was great to talk to you.
It's a pleasure.
Andrew Hudson is an organic gardener, Mennonite minister, and program director for the nonprofit organization Community Harvest SRQ. If you want to get involved or learn more about Eat Local Week, which is coming up this fall, you can find a link to Community Harvest SRQ in the show notes wherever you're listening to this episode or on our website, thezestpodcast.com. Thank you, Chef Steve Phelps, for connecting me with Andrew. Who else do you know? Send them my way. I'm Dalia Colon. I produce The Zest with Andrew Lucas and Alexandria Ebron. The Zest is a production of WUSF, copyright 2026, part of the NPR network.